Hello and welcome, Fright friends, to this, the Horror Story Corner, where today we have a completely original tale penned by one of our listeners. It concerns death, and just how that death may creep from its grave to affect us, physically and mentally, should we spend too long amongst it. This is part one of a much longer text, although our creepy contributor would love your opinions and well wishes in the comments below. If you'd like your own tale to be read out on the channel, or have a suggestion for a story that you'd like to be read, why not get in touch via the comments below, or by contacting the email linked to this channel. For now, though, sit back, ignore those murderous shapes in the corner of your eyes, and enjoy the Autopsy of Kaleigh by Mike Llanas. Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from what is dishonourable, he will be a vessel for honourable use, set apart as holy, useful to the master of the house, ready for every good work. This house of the dead, a house where time has no meaning, no use, and no end. The faces of pallor, fright, calm and distant gazes, all greeted by some tragedy to someone. These corpses, slowly decaying matter, no matter. They all have a story to tell, outside and in. Their skin, the paper, and their blood, the ink. It's your job to find the words to these deathly visages. To tell their story, you must first face your own death, your own demise, your own sanity, and face that great beyond. The real conundrum here is, does the story end at death? Or are there other chapters? A distant, distorted voice mutters, "Tell me more." I cannot tell you my story without telling you their story. It begins with my first job out of college after my medical residency at Marquette University in Milwaukee. St. Joseph Hospital, a newly erected building in medium-sized hub town of Lions Lake, Wisconsin. The kind of place where the city meets the rural, where pastoral meets progression, and the struggle between the two makes for everything at a standstill. Still, it was a nice place to call home. The advantage of such a place is I would no longer have to suffer from 1,000 weeping pinhole bleeds in the form of property taxes, given my new tax bracket of my newly acquired title, medical pathologist, just below the chief medical pathologist whom interviewed me, Dr. Boozer, a German immigrant that came over to America in the early 1950s. He had a very deep Bavarian accent that was often hard to make out. However, if you'll permit me a small pun, I would have been taxed to death. That's not the way I envisioned my own demise. Maybe sipping a fine crimson vermouth at one of the many dive bars that frequent this small town. However, I must admit my palate, as refined as it can be, does enjoy a nice grease-trap burger with the crispest and crunchiest onion rings, with a side of A1 sauce for dipping. A few boos from the gallery. There is no greater rapture than an artery-clogging meal brought straight to you by the Heartland Dietary Council. Though I do miss a good Juicy Lucy from my homeland. 8533 Shadowbrook Road, the residence of yours truly. A dead-end road with only 2 houses on the other side of the road. Some might call them your classic fixer-uppers. I called them dilapidated. At the end of the line is a stately orange sign that reads Dead End, with the ND severely faded, and 2 dull, milky grey-yellow lights that strobe throughout the night. Just beyond the Dead End sign is quite a large deadfall, and a vast forest that many a Midwest creature calls home. Mostly squirrels, rabbits, chipmunks, raccoons, skunks, and the occasional deer. 385,000 was the asking price for a 1920s built 2-story craftsman-style house that consists of perfectly matched wood and stone exterior, newly redone roof, adjoining double-car garage, and a quaint Gothic-style porch area. However, I was able to pick it up for a very reasonable 250,000. I did not think that my bid was going to be taken. The real estate agent fought a valiant effort, but eventually relinquished. I don't think there was much interest in the old place. This area of town was definitely the land that time forgot. The state of the road is just an upgrade above dirt. For, as inviting as the outside seemed, the inside was in a much rougher condition. I honestly don't think it had been updated since it was built. Hell, even the toilet had the chain-link pulley system. The wiring of the house also left much to be desired. Think gnawing rats, creating shorts, as crispy electrocuted rat flesh wafts through the stale air. Every once in a while the lights would go dim, flicker a few times, and stop. No rhyme, no reason. Just to keep me on my toes, I suppose. The subtle reminder that I could be engulfed in flames at any moment. I guess I didn't mind so much. I looked forward to the challenge of being a first-time homeowner. Truly a trial by fire. The first few weeks was rather simple at St. Joseph Hospital, more or less getting staff situated, standard operating systems in place, filing, learning everyone's names, learning the lay of the land, figuring out the maze-like structure, etc., and so forth. The boring shit. I didn't even see my first body till about a month and a half in. We have a new body coming in at 3 p.m. Make sure we have a table open for it, exclaimed Dr. Boozer, as he flipped through his charts. Move Miss Anders back into cold storage until we get the proper equipment in, Mr. Boozer said sternly. I guess truckers and cavity injectors are in short supply, yeah? He said with a smirk. I quickly remarked, Right away, sir. I began to pull a thin white sheet over her body, and think to myself as I wheeled her over to the coolers. Oh, Mrs. Anders, let's go put you back on ice. Let you chill out for a while. I began to look over her file on the clipboard. Official cause of death. Pending myocardial infraction. Biopsy of adipose tissue abnormal. Waiting on toxicology findings. Quite young to be having a heart attack, and the family is suspicious of some sort of intentional poisoning. We are waiting on the toxicologists to complete their sample, and we can rubber stamp the cause of death. I crack open the far left bottom compartment of the refrigerator and wheel Mrs. Anders just in front of it. Pull out the table catches, slide her in till it locks. I begin to push her back into the chamber, and a puff of air pushes the sheet up, right to where her mouth is. That's odd, I think to myself. I've sewn her mouth shut quite well. Gas shouldn't be escaping at this point. I continue to ponder. I begin to question myself. Maybe I didn't puncture enough holes to let enough gas out. Oh well. I quickly alleviate any anxiety I have and continue on with my daily routine. This routine consists of basically assisting Dr. Boozer. Paperwork, clean-up, paperwork, doling out the duties as I have no desire to do what the subordinates do. Their names are Glenn and Stacy. And did I mention more paperwork? Glenn and Stacy are as green as they come, though they're passionate about what they do. It takes a truly special person to do what we do day in and day out. It takes a toll mentally and physically. Sometimes I dream of the Jane and John Does, their pale skin emerging from the inky blackness, cracking sounds emitting from every joint because the rigor mortis hasn't been worked out. Slowly they move towards me. The dull, lifeless and cloudy black eyes stare right into my soul. As they get closer, they reach for me and place their hands on my shoulders and lean in. They bring their sewn mouths to my ears and nothing. No words. And they slowly turn back around and slowly walk back into the darkness, fading back into nothingness. Something I wish I knew about before gaining an interest in this line of work. I must admit, however, that once you get into the routine of things, everything is like clockwork, and it's body in and body out. You become so laser-focused that you don't have time to process that these were once living people. At this point, they become like pictures in a book. Well, maybe, if the Necronomicon was a real book anyways. It helps if you, for a lack of a better word, dehumanize them. Give them nicknames. Unless, of course, a family member is there to identify the body. There are moments, though, where the grotesque nature of man is on full display. About 6 months in, there was a horrific car crash with one of the parties involved that were 2.5 times over the legal limit of alcohol, later confirmed by toxicology reports. The two other victims were a father and his daughter, Mr. Blake, who was 35, and Miss Blake, his 14-year-old daughter. Both were pronounced dead at the scene. Now is the time to swallow that hard emotional pill and get to work. You owe it to everyone involved. This is where the dead speak. I begin to look over the cadaver's blue and pallid skin. I speak very clinically into my recording device. Subject 1. Mr. Blake has several contusions on his thorax, around both sides of the cervical spine, and both quadriceps femoris. An open fracture on his right antebrachium, most likely due to trying to brace second subject. Lacerations are also abundant from the right abductor pollicis longus through the extensor digitorum, finally ending through to the anconeus. Depressed skull fracture from a blunt force trauma from the right temporalis, clean through to the occipital oculi. Supraorbital ridge remains intact. Squamosal suture splintered, with pieces of parietal bone missing. In occlusion of the right eye. My mind goes blank as I stare at his grotesque face. I quickly shut off the tape recorder. I noticed his left eye is wide open and his mouth agape in terror, forever frozen in time from that one single act. I let out a deep, single sigh and close my eyes as I click the tape recorder back on. Emotionlessly, I speak. Cause of death, blunt force trauma to the brain. Glenn storms into the autopsy room with brutish force, whistling a whimsical tune. It quickly breaks the tensive feelings I have. I speak in a bossly tone. Hey, G-Spot, could you tag this one for me and stick him in Cooler 5, please? Glenn stammers. Sure thing, Elias. In a rewarding tone, I say to Glenn, Thanks. And when you're done with that, please bring out the body from freezer number 319 and get her prepped. I need to take a bathroom break, and then I'll walk you through the process. Sounds good? I ask inquisitively. Glenn quickly blurts, "Of course, Mr. Swent. I'll get right on that." I nod in approval and head for the sweet refuge of the porcelain thrones. It's a great time to take a sabbatical and decompress while you do your business away from the business. The bathroom is as sterile as it gets. Dull yet shiny silver steel sheets, sinks, long tubular gooseneck faucets, dull grey hardened bricks, twinkling fluorescent lights, and hospital blue stalls. The only break-up in the monotony is the red bio waste bins, shops container, and the black Kimberly Flock hand paper dispenser / disinfecting soap. Since it is our special Autopsy Morgue members only bathroom, we were able to put a few homey touches to it. A very frayed wicker book magazine rack full of medical magazines, home digests, football, and other sports, and for some ungodly reason, women's underwear catalogues. I couldn't imagine amongst this gravely place having any sort of sexual urges. But who am I to judge? People will do just about anything to keep their minds off of the reality, even for a few minutes. A clear glass vase with some colourful flowers of the various seasons, and of course the monthly posted joke, moral booster, of Mr. Boozer's unique humour. This month's special is a picture of a cartoon rabbit with black tread marks over his squished body, with a joke that reads, "What happened to the bunny when he crossed the road?" with the punchline being, "He got tired." Oh, what a knee slapper, I think mockingly. Well, time to get back at it, I think aloud as I look at myself in the mirror and splash water on my face. I begin to wipe my face off and catch a glimpse of something reflecting on the mirror in one of the stalls. I quickly jut around, and noticing one of the stall doors wafting shut, I belt out a hello. "This isn't a joke," I say nervously. But I'm met with no response, so quickly I step towards the stall and fling the stall door open. Absolutely nothing. Am I seeing things? I question myself. It has been a stressful month, that's for sure. I think reassuringly to myself. I quickly toss the paper towel in the bin and head on out of the bathroom. I make my way over to the second body of the little girl and take a quick scan of the room. Where the hell is Glenn? I say softly. "Glenn, you there?" I speak in a much louder tone. Then out of nowhere a hand reaches and touches my shoulder. "Holy crap!" I scream. "Whoa, dude, it's just me, man," Glenn explains nervously. "Jesus Christ, man, don't sneak up on me like that," I shout, expressing my frustration. "Sorry, my man. Didn't mean to startle you. You've been really bonkers lately. You ought to switch a day with me. Take off and take a breather," Glenn pleads. "You know what? I might just do that. We just have to run it by Mr. Boozer first, though," I explain calmly. "But before that, let's dive into this body, shall we?" I ask politely. "Sure thing, boss man," Glenn speaks in a reluctant tone. "Remove the sheet for me, Glenn," I ask nicely. Glenn doesn't say a word, and furls the white sheet and places it at her feet. Just like that, the energy is gone out of the room, and I quickly notice that Glenn appears to be uneasy. "Now remember, Glenn, we have a job to do. Let's be professional about this." "You're right, boss," says Glenn. "Name of the patient?" I ask. "Martha Blake, aged 14, strawberry blonde hair, eyes pale blue, about 5'4". Glenn reads it off as if it were a laundry list. Start from the top and your way down, I say, directing Glenn. Yes, Glenn quickly blurts. He begins to systematically list. Large contusions on the right zygoma, cheek, mandible, and mental protuberance. Complete amputation of right arm at the midsection of biceps, brachii. Complete amputation of the midsection starting at the lower epigastric region, extending down to the upper umbilical region. Gallbladder intact, gastrointestinal perforation, traverse and ascending colon of the large intestines missing. Small intestines largely missing. Lacerations present on both sides of the anterior side of the legs. Large contusion on right acetobulofemoral joint. No pathology needed. Cause of death? Exsanguination due to trauma. Manner of death? Accident. After a momentary pause, I begin to cross-examine the body. As I inspect it, I notice something amiss. Are you sure cause of death is exsanguination? I question Glenn. Glenn shoots me a shocked expression and explains his reasoning. It's quite obvious due to the injuries presented. I quickly rebuke. Sometimes the most obvious isn't the correct answer. In instances such as this, where there are the possibilities of multiple modes of death, we must check every path to make certain. If you say so, Glenn stammers in disbelief. I quickly point out. See up here? I point to just above the zygoma area. What does this look like to you? Glenn quickly goes in for a closer look. Looks to be a slight hematoma? Bingo! And since it's right above the zygoma, I'm betting on intercranial fractures with hematoma, given the fact that it was a high-impact car crash. The likelihood of subdural or epidural hematoma is very likely. Glenn stares at me, shocked, and I take a deep breath and ask, grab the tools and make the incision from the temple to the orbital socket. Glenn, without saying a word, surgically cuts the pale skin. Now, peel the derma back and remove any fatty tissue, I order Glenn. Before he can even speak, I tell him, tell me what you see. Glenn takes a deep, laboured breath. I can see fractured bits of bone like shattered glass. There seems to be some small pieces missing. I interrupt him before he can finish. Looks like we may need to remove the skull and perform an autopsy on the brain. We will surely need an okay from the family and Dr. Boozer. Looks like that's all we can do now for her. Let's get her sheeted up and put back into storage. I quickly notice that Glenn is having a hard time with this one as we put the sheet over the deceased girl's body. We begin wheeling her over to the storage containers and stop just before reaching the refrigerators. I console him. I know you meant well, Glenn, and trust me when I say this, you're going to get where you need to be. You have real talent. Glenn sighs deeply and nods. Just make sure you have the approval paperwork on Dr. B's desk before you leave, and I'll catch you later. I'm going to stay behind for a few and do some admin, I say with a yawn. Catch you later, Glenn says as he smacks his lips. Click, 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 clack, clack, tick, tock, tick, tock. This is mundane. This is the true hell. Staring at an old CRT computer screen with intelligible black pixels set up with white sheets. The constant whirring of the computer fan, slow, then fast, then back, slow again. That's when the mind wanders. That's when the eyes start to burn. No amount of caffeine or heroin can get you out of this man-made stupor. I look at the sticker of the computer tower. Farmway Tech, with a lovely pattern of a spotted cow. Perfect for the hicks of Wisconsin, I think to myself. I begin typing some more, and my vision gets blurry once again. I lean forward towards the glass computer screen, and then suddenly I hear a faint bang. I jut back into my chair and swivel it around to get out. What the hell? I say aloud. Bang! Bang! There it is again. I quickly stand up from my chair, and the computer screen starts to fizzle. I walk with a slight creeping terror in every footstep as I investigate. I make my way out of my office, into the operating room. I scan every bit of the scene and find nothing amiss. I loop around the operating tables and I look down onto the brown concrete slabs. A pool of fresh blood with a long trail. Bang! 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 The lights above the operating table begin to fizzle from light to dark. Help me! I'm going to suffocate! A muffled girl's voice emanates from thin air. In a startled breath, I aim it. Hello? Utter silence, and I take a step forward, following the blood trail. As I follow it, I begin to hear a whispering voice in my head. This way. Follow. I follow the trail, through the swinging operation room doors, down the hallway, and into the storage room. The trail of blood goes from the floor to the side of the wall, up to the ceiling, from the ceiling back down to the wall that meets where we store the cadavers. The trail ceases at storage container number 219. Go on, the whispers continue. I take several steps forward, and the lights continue to flicker on and off. My eyes must be playing games with me. I think I see crimson eyes when the lights disappear, but just for that split second. What are you? Then suddenly the lights go completely out. I stop dead, frozen in my tracks, and I begin to breathe heavily. I start to hear faint snarls off in the distance, and my breathing becomes more rapid. The snarls are moving, and I jut out my hands trying to catch whatever is stalking me. Bang, 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 bang! Lights come back on. I gather my composure and make a quick 360 turn to ensure everything is normal. The blood trail is gone. I turn back around, and the door for 219 is open. Help me. Sounds like a girl gasping for air, I think to myself. I quickly run up to the storage container door and take a pause. I peek into the inky blackness and put my hand on the bar to pull out the body, and suddenly a putrid black hand grasps my neck. Then I'm slammed back into reality, and whilst I'm choking for air, I notice that it's gone. I place my hands on my neck and assure myself, just dreaming, just seeing things. I let out a breathy chuckle and try to calm myself down. I need to stop drinking so much coffee, I say under my breath. I compose myself, move over to the computer, and sign out. That's enough of this shit for tonight, I say, annoyed. I don't think I ever left that place as quickly as I did that night, and from then on, it's always stayed with me, though I never spoke about it to anyone that I work with. I rushed to my car and locked the door and got in. While slamming the door shut, I placed my head on the steering wheel and let out a huge sigh. What is happening to me? Questioning my own sanity. Can it truly be just stress? I ponder some more. Good thing I got this new Metallica CD. I put the key into the ignition, turn it clockwise, and it comes on. Ripping open the plastic seal can be a pain in the arse. And in this case, it's no different. My fingernails are cut too short, but luckily, I've perfected the teeth technique. I begin gnawing on the edge of the CD, trying to ponder the plastic off. Success, I say aloud, just before spitting out shards of partly shredded plastic. I peruse the cover. Metallica logo and blood red. No album title, I think to myself. I pop out the CD and place it into the CD player. High energy metal plays out of the speakers, and I put the car in drive. On my way home, I robotically headbang slightly to the high-octane music, and I can't help but have racing thoughts invade my head about my dream. It's almost as if I can feel them lurking in the dark muck of my subconscious. I look out of the driver's side window in almost a zombie-like state and start to see red. Tires begin to screech, and honks ensue. I slam on my brakes, and it takes me a while to notice that I almost ran through a red light and would have rammed a car in the intersection. A good thing home is only a few blocks away, I nervously think to myself. I pull onto my street, completely dazed and slightly confused. I can see those faded yellow lights blinking incessantly, most enticing me to come to it, like a moth to a light bulb, drawing me in with a false sense of security. I gladly oblige and veer towards the light, slowly making my turn into the driveway. By this time, several songs of the high-octane metal have ceased, and now onto the start of a ballad song. Just what the doctor ordered, I say with a grin. I close my eyes and sway with the music. Halfway through the song, I feel much calmer. What's the name of this song? I flip through the CD booklet and look for track 6. I blurt, The Forgiven. Very soothing. I click the keys counterclockwise, shutting off the car, and gingerly open the door. I slam the door shut and click the lock button on the key remote. I clearly hear the electronic clicking sounds and head up the sidewalk to the front door. Before I put my keys into the house door, I hear a slightly muted grunt. Must be a fawn. I begin to fumble with the keys, and they drop out of my hand. I bend over to pick them up and clobber my forehead on the doorknob. God damn it! I angrily shout. I pick up the keys and insert them into the lock, swinging open the door wildly. I flick the light switch, storm into the kitchen, open the freezer, and grab a small handful of ice cubes. I hurriedly stomp back into the living room and plop myself on the couch. I rub the ice cubes ever so slightly over my now throbbing forehead. I do this for several minutes and realize that I've left the front door open, and I can hear it. Hinges squeak with even the slightest movement. The slightest disturbance annoys me greatly, so I get up off the couch to close the door. I grab the doorknob and notice something out of my blurry peripherals. I look out into the street and see a wheezing black figure jutting across the pavement, sliding under the dead end and disappearing into the deadfall. What? That was weird, I say, confusedly, chalking it up to my pounding headache and my blurry vision. Probably just another raccoon or something, I assure myself. I compose myself and sit back down on the couch. I pick up the remote off of the coffee table and flip on the tube. I turn the channel to the weather to see the upcoming forecast. I intermittently pick up bits and pieces while I caress the ice cubes into my temples and onto my forehead. It only relieves the pain ever so slightly, but the placebo eventually makes it tolerable. The weather comes into focus. Now here's Toby with the weather. Thank you, Susan. It's going to be absolutely celestial out there, Susan. So get out there and raise your demons. kill the... What the hell? I say to myself and look up. Upcoming in Lyons, Wisconsin, it looks like a lot of rain in the future. Better put off those outside plans for later, or get them done early. The weatherman states matter-of-factly. Did I hit my head harder than I thought? I close my eyes and take a couple of deep breaths. Talking to myself, I say, calm down, buddy. Just as the ice cubes are used up and drip in between my fingers, I open my eyes. I let loose one final deep breath, and as I do, the lights begin to flicker on and off. Are you kidding me right now? Go away, you electrical demon! I scream. I've had enough of this for one night. Still screaming, I turn off the TV and the light switch and stomp my way upstairs and head to the bathroom for some aspirin and a quick hot shower. I make my way up to the bathroom and head for the medicine cabinet above the sink. I look into the mirror and see a tiny little goose egg forming on my forehead. Just great, I think to myself. I fling open the cabinet door and look for the ibuprofen. I grab the bottle and I twist the cap open. I take out 3 500-milligram tablets, turn on the water faucet, and lean down to suck the water straight from the tap like a caveman. I swish the water around for a few seconds and then pop the pills into my mouth. I swallow the pills as quickly as humanly possible. I grab the towel from off the towel rack, turn on the shower head, and set the temperature to lava. I quickly get into the tub and wash away the day's sorrow. I pay particular attention to each droplet of water that rushes down from my hair, over my face, and down my stomach. There is nothing more soothing than a nice hot shower. I lather up the new Spice 2-in-1 shampoo and body wash, making sure I hit every crevice with soapy suds. Sometimes I have a hard time feeling clean and get the sense that I'm bathed in death. I'll do whatever it takes to get that feeling to go away, sometimes even doubling down the new Spice. I'll also let the water continuously run over me till all the hot water is gone. Just stand there and have a blank mind till I feel that first droplet not be lava anymore. It seems without warning and without it feeling like no time has passed that the water is getting cold. I turn it off, open up the shower curtain and grab the towel from off the toilet seat. I always dry myself from head and then work my way down. Of course, just as soon as I start drying myself off, the lights start flickering again. But this time, after about 3 short bursts, the light remains constant and intensifies until I hear the bulb pop and then fizzle into darkness. God damn it. God damn this house. Nothing ever works right. But at least the bulb didn't shatter. I guess the good feelings were short-lived, and slam back into reality once more. I quickly dry myself off and head to the master bedroom, fumbling around in the darkness. I make my way to the bedroom, and I see the beacon of hope. There shines a faint orange glow from the sign down the road, falling right onto my king-size bed. Being so exhausted, I don't even put on any underwear and just hop into bed. Commando it is, I think, with devilish delight. I pull the covers up to just below my neck and lay my head sideways and close my eyes. Within seconds, I am transported into the deepest slumber that I've ever experienced. I'm transported to a childhood memory, fishing on a lake, Minnetonka with my dad. Everything was sepia-toned, and like I'm viewing myself through an old vintage camera. I pull up a huge trout about 15 inches, and it just wiggles away as my dad and I pose for a picture. Everything gets all fuzzy and dark. Out of the darkness, I awake outside, lying on the tepid black pavement. There is a bit of drool pooling. As I get up, I wipe the wet residue off my mouth and cheek. I sit and notice that I'm outside of my house, about a few houses down, but facing the opposite way. "Turn around," a voice calls out to me softly. I do as instructed and slowly turn around. I do so, without seemingly controlling my own movements. I slowly turn around, and just in front of the dead-end sign is a pale white figure. The entity motions for me to come closer. Without even thinking, I take several hurried steps towards it. As I get closer to the figure, I notice it's a girl. I continue taking steps closer and closer, noticing the slight slapping sound of my shoeless feet hitting the pavement. I stop just in front of my house. "Closer," the entity pleads with me. This time, I notice that it looks like Martha. I'm stopped dead in my tracks, and don't think I can move any further. Before I can say anything, I see a single black tear run down her pale face, and she turns around, slowly discorporating, as she walks through the dead-end sign and into nothingness. I'm so distraught I don't know what to do. I decide to walk up to the dead-end sign to investigate. Suddenly, and without warning, I hear a faint, "Come with me." I'm suddenly awoken by a bright, shining beam of sunshine disrupting any fantasy that what I experienced was real. It felt so vivid, though. Good thing that on this rotation it's my weekend off. I can finally get down to the nitty-gritty and take a look downstairs at the fuse box and see why the lights keep acting up. But in the meantime, it's also the banality of being single that really takes a hold. No one to spend my time with, and no one to help me with these things. I have to tend to something, and it keeps my mind busy, away from the horrors of work and my eternal loneliness that I keep so tightly wrapped around my chest. It's when the mind rests that those feelings come up the most. The pervasive thoughts of lust, innuendo, sexual failures, and social ineptitude creep in like a nettle root, stinging every time it rears its ugly face. If you're like me, you'll be at the grocery store picking out your favourite salsa and chips, looking for the best bargain to taste ratio, and along comes Mrs. Sexy out of nowhere, and we both reach for the same Mexicali Taqueria queso dip, and you bump hands. You feel an immediate feeling of inadequacy and shame. "No, you first, Ma'am, I'm so sorry," you say politely, which is immediately followed by that awkward silence, yet she's smiling, and you can see her eyes flutter. There's your chance. Take your shot. But nope, never happens. You freeze up and wait for her to make her selection. Then as you finish your shopping, you tank into your thoughts about what-ifs, the fantasy, and then ultimately the all-too-familiar feelings of failure. I was never one to be a social butterfly or smooth with the ladies. Not quite handsome enough, and all the hobbies nerdy. But not quite ugly enough to be felt sorry for. I wouldn't say a plain Jane, but certainly unnoticeable in a crowd. Could you pick me out of a lineup? Probably not. But that's not without its perks. You are underestimated at every turn. Therein lies the success. More times than not, the excitement exuded by the interviewers at job prospects or for scholarships to that one private university that you really want to go to. Too bad that doesn't really translate well into finding a relationship with the fairer sex. If only you could just say what you bring to her company and crunch the numbers on why you'd be perfect. A perfect fit for her growing enterprise. But alas, I am reliant upon chemical reactions, specifically dopamine and norepinephrine, a lovely neurotransmitter located in the hypothalamus and the locus ceruleus, all designed to trick our lizard brains to procreate and proliferate as a species. Kind of takes the joy of it. Most, anyways. Like my mum always used to tell me, ignorance is bliss. How true. Before I began the path that I am on, I had to learn the hard way that when you deal with death on a daily basis, you question heaven, hell, the afterlife, and the implications of your own organic being. Not so much the physical part. That's the part easiest explained. I'm talking more about conscious thought and our energy. How do we get ego, id, and superego out of electrical signals and firings in a piece of meat? The meat being our brains. And once brain death occurs, is there anything beyond the final punchline to your life? However, there is another strong aspect of science we have to take into consideration, and that's energy. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, so that energy has to go somewhere, which can be as varied as the sky is long. I am not one to believe in ghosts, demons, ghoulies, or anything else, any more than I am inclined to believe in the tooth fairy, Santa Claus, Nosferatu, lichens, genies, golems, or any other figment of people's imagination. Until recently, that is. Chapter 2. The Memories of the Dead. 1984, Apple Grove, Minnesota. My hometown and my birthplace. The year of my birth was 1971, and as my mother would state, a traumatic birthing experience. She told me, before she died, that it took me 4 days to be delivered, because I got stuck in the birthing canal, and the doctors had to perform an emergency C-section. She had a long recovery process and was unable to bear any other children after that. She always called me her little miracle. C-section births were very uncommon for the time period, and especially with the slim rural population. There hadn't been one performed here before. The doctors, before the procedure, weren't sure how well it would go, but she thanked her lucky stars that everything was okay. I was always a peculiar and curious little child. While my schoolmates were more into sports and athletics, I was into digging deeper into things, something that quite irked my strict father. He was a very tall and slim man with a temper as short as his hair, which, to not put quite so fine a point on it, wasn't really there. He grew up in a military home right after World War II, so his father was quite shaken by the Great War and instilled a fear in his children. He ruled with an iron fist and regularly beat them after a long night of binge drinking, trying to calm his own demons that latched onto him from the horrors of war. I remember quite vividly one summer playing in a field near our house, lolling amongst the tall grass, blowing white dandelion seeds and looking up to heavenly clouds without a care in the world. Right before sundown I tripped on an uneven patch of sunburnt grass and tumbled to the ground. I hit my head pretty hard and laid amongst the grass until the clouds quit moving. I sat up and I experienced my first sight of death. There, just beside me, was a baby bunny, no older than a month. It showed no visible signs of predatory wounds, but remained lifeless. I leaned over to my side to investigate further. I stroked its fine fur, played with its floppy and fuzzy ears. Upon playing with it, I thought to myself, I wonder what it would look like on the inside. So I scooped it up and held it like a baby in a blanket, with my shirt. I trotted back home, making sure to take extra care of the rabbit. It felt like a mission, and I wouldn't be stopped. I made my way home in a matter of minutes and went into my dad's shed for some privacy. I placed the bunny lovingly on a bench and went inside to see if Dad was still taking his nap. I could hear him snoring away in his room, so I crept back downstairs and made my way into the kitchen. I slowly slid the silverware drawer open and grabbed the first serrated knife I could find. I hurriedly picked it up and closed the silverware drawer. Before I scrambled back out to the shed, I looked around to make sure no one had seen me. I knew my mother would be home soon, and Dad would be waking up for his nightly graveyard shift as a security guard at the local jail. I went out the back door, making certain that the swinging door wouldn't make a clatter. Once my shoes hit the dirt, I felt home free and could indulge my fantasy in peace. Funny thing is, I knew even back then that it was wrong, and it made me feel quite funny, like I wasn't supposed to be doing this, and it isn't normal. Nonetheless, I felt exhilarated at the prospect of it. Finally reaching the bench where the lifeless bunny lay, I placed the knife next to it. I looked it over and felt its claws against my fingers and nails, looked inside its ears, and noticed that the bunny's eyes had gone from pure jet black to a milky and dull grey. I outlined where I should make my first cut, deciding on just behind the ear on the left side. I placed the bunny on its back and I picked up the knife, delicately cutting from the left ear around the neck to the trachea. The first thing I noticed was there wasn't any bleeding. I found that quite odd. I took notice of how the blade tugged at the flesh as opposed to clean slices. Once I cut the trachea, I realigned the knife and cut straight down the belly to the tail. I was shocked to find that there was a thin layer of membrane around the organs. I took my fingers and opened the skin up a little more. Beyond the thin membrane, the first thing that struck me was the colon and how large and dark brown it was. All I could see was this and the stomach. And while this was all extremely exhilarating, I couldn't help feeling slightly nauseated. Again, curiosity got the best of me, and I grabbed the knife once more to slit the membrane. "Elias Patrick Swent!" screamed my dad. "Just what the hell do you think you're doing?" My father screamed some more. In utter shock and terror, I dropped the knife. Nothing, Dad," I stammered. In a rage, my father lunged at me and struck me right in the mouth. I collapsed to the ground, crying immediately. With my eyes full of tears, I could see him ball up his fist once again, and he was breathing heavily. I defensively put my hands over my face to cover it. "You better get your ass to your bedroom before I skin your hide like you did to that animal!" I got up as quickly as I could and went straight for my room. For the first time in my very existence, I felt a shame like I had never experienced before. It was also the first time I tasted blood. My lip had slit open, and I distinctly remember it tasting like copper pennies. I stewed in my room and paced back and forth, waiting certain death at the hands of my father. Every single second that passed felt like an eternity. About an hour later, just a few minutes after the sun had gone down, I heard 3 thunderous knocks at my door. My heart immediately jumped into my throat and I couldn't breathe. "Come in," I said with a lump in my throat. The wooden door creaked open, and I felt a wave of relief come over me. It was my mum. "Eli, can I come in?" she softly asked. Of course, Mum," I whimpered. "Your father told me about your package in the garage. Why did you feel the need to kill that poor defenseless?" she questioned. I interrupted. "I didn't kill it, Mama. I found it already dead in the field next to the house. I was just curious to see what it looked like on the inside. Please believe me, Mama. Please." "Oh, I believe you, honey. Let me talk it over with your father and we'll decide on a punishment for you tomorrow. In the meantime, Dad has already left for work. Go downstairs and get some dinner, then wash up and go to bed. No television tonight," my mum directed me. "I'm not really hungry tonight, Mum," I quickly blurted out. "We'll get up and get ready for bed then. Your clothes will be downstairs for school tomorrow." Speaking to me lovingly, I smiled and said, "Thank you, Mama." She then kissed my cheek, and I went straight to the bathroom to brush my teeth. Afterwards, I slipped into my nightly pyjamas. Well,
So many questions left unanswered. Just who is this vision? And is it real or just the knock on his head? How will all this death affect our protagonist? Hopefully we'll find out in the future, should part 2 emerge from the darker parts of the Horror Story Corner. Thank you for listening, and as ever, sleep well.